to join us. So good morning. As I said, this is the next in a series of quick and snappy HR how-tos. So this morning, I'm going to talk to you about how to identify and address reasons for grievances, your legal responsibilities for grievances, the importance of handling grievances in the workplace, how to respond to them, and then ask questions. And as some of you that have been joining the series already know, I will canter through this, give you some very practical advice, share with you our own experiences in this area, and leave 10 minutes at the end of the session for us to ask questions, for you to ask questions and share information that you might want to know. So before we do that, as you know, we like to just hear a bit from you. So if you could take to the chat function, I'm interested to hear what are the top reasons for grievances in your organisation. So you don't have to share very personal details or confidential information, but what types of topics, if you have dealt with grievances, do they tend to be about? So 1 word, 2 words in the chat box would be great. So it might be, for example, terms and conditions, or it might be harassment or discrimination. So yeah, do share, do share your experience. No answer is a wrong answer, by the way. People being maybe a little shy. Kirsty, you might want to share some of the topics that we've been dealing with. Dismissal, disagreements, good.
Generally sort of work, sort of trying to think of the word, quality of work, things like that.
Yeah,
Pressure of work, stress.
Yeah, good, absolutely. Yeah, that has definitely been front of mind for people. Terms and conditions for seasonal staff, annoyance with other staff. Yeah, interpersonal relationships are always included in the grievances. So shout out there, Pam. Complaints about managers and colleagues. Yeah, absolutely. Good, thank you. Yeah, I mean, as Kirsty says, as you are saying, yeah, these these are very common occurrences in the workplace around why why there are grievances. So what is a grievance then? And I'm going to lean into the organization called ACAS, which is the conciliatory organization that sets out for us the framework that we should use to deal with these issues. And what the ACAS code of practice tells us are that invariably there will be grievances in organizations, and we shouldn't be necessarily frightened of those. It's a factor of life that people will reach disagreements, and the focus becomes more then on how you deal with them. So from time to time, people will have challenges and they will want to have their grievances addressed. And ACAS's view then is it becomes the responsibility of the management or the owner or the leader to ultimately face in and take the lead in dealing with that situation. And there's a big piece here with grievances about dealing with them in an open and transparent way so that people can feel that they have been heard, because very often what we find is at the center of grievances is a view that people feel they've been mistreated or they've not been listened to or been taken seriously. So these are the top causes for grievances sent through on a recent survey that looked at what organisations are reporting around the causes for grievances. Top of the pops is bullying and harassment, discrimination, and then third is line management. And I would absolutely concur with this. We, for our own experience, are probably seeing less so on the bullying front, but we are sometimes having to deal most recently with cases of harassment and sexual harassment. You may be aware from some of our previous webinars that in terms of sexual harassment, the law is going to be tightened up on that, and ACAS themselves have just issued a new code of conduct, which is excellent. So we will cover that off separately. Unfortunately, also there is a continuance of discrimination claims, and that discrimination claim can be race, age, gender, sexual orientation, anything that the Equality Act covers. So, and line management, so where employees feel that their relationships have broken down with the line manager. So I would absolutely concur with these top three. They are definitely for us in the right order. So how we deal with them then is really governed by the ACAS code of practice, the discipline and grievance at work practice. And the whole much more practical point here that we always tell clients is that if there are grievances or disputes, the best thing you can do is to deal with them early and at the point that they arise. Often people are nervous about that because they don't like conflict, or they don't like to acknowledge sometimes that maybe relationships at work are strained, but they really do need to be dealt with immediately. And it's really about looking at how to improve the situation rather than trying to undo something in the past that potentially is not going to be, undoable, if that's even a word. So the whole focus of your grievance process is to look at what's happened and then to correct it moving forward. As I said, in really practical terms with grievances, very often employees will want to see that you are taking them seriously and giving them the time and space to share what they are concerned about. And even just that listening exercise can sometimes more informally help resolve grievances. And I'll talk a bit more about the formal versus informal approach. You are obliged, as you are with any part of the employment relationship, to make sure that you're showing fair decision-making processes and acting with consistency and transparency. And the ACAS legislation, the ACAS code, excuse me, sets that out and is something that we as a HR outsource provider will always be falling back on ultimately as the framework for what is not just required, but best practice. So how does it work in reality then? What you need to be is alert to what your people are telling you. So it might be that, for example, someone is telling you on a number of occasions through a one-to-one that they're not getting on with their line manager, or that they're having an issue with somebody in the office. And that's your trigger then to think about what informal action can I take to essentially nip this situation in the bud. We do find in the large majority of cases that it's the informal action that stops things progressing because things are dealt with quickly. We do also find sometimes that it's helpful to role play that. So do call us if you want to, role play through that conversation or talk about your own anxieties or concerns, because we do that a lot with our clients. But ultimately, if the situation can't be dealt with informally, then it has to be moved to a formal process. And this is where the employee then writes to you and outlines the reason for their grievance. Now, I will say here, this is where it all starts to get a little bit interesting, because what experience is showing at the moment is you can tell people as much as you like that you just need them to base their grievance on factual situations for you to investigate. At my latest count, the biggest grievance I dealt with was 32 pages long. And we could have probably condensed that into about 4 or 5 key points, but people are tending to want to leave no stone unturned with grievances at the moment. So it's a small but important point that if people are telling you they're going to raise a grievance, to remind them that the responsibility they have is to set their position out factually and to avoid, padding lots of emotional responses and views around it, because it will genuinely tie you up in knots. Like any situation, you will want to make sure that you meet the employee promptly, that is a formal part of the ACAS process, and that also means that they have a right to be accompanied. That accompaniment is by a trade union representative or a colleague. And once you've heard that employee's grievance, it's then your responsibility to go off and investigate that further. Ultimately, it all comes together. The grievance response is prepared and sent, and then the right of appeal is provided. Probably worth a pit stop at the right of appeal, because it's a very helpful safety net, if you like, whereby if there have been flaws in the investigation or things inadvertently missed out, what the right of appeal does is gives you a second chance, if you like, a second bite at the cherry to go back and correct any of those things. And we always say that you are in the best position when you're able to control what's going on. So when you've got these informal and formal grievances, you've got full control. And as long as they're managed well, generally speaking, you shouldn't then find yourself in an employment tribunal, even if the outcome of that grievance is not what the employee may expect. A well-run grievance done fairly, transparently, thoroughly, and thoughtfully often gives employees the confidence that at least they've been listened to. And to be honest, I think in my experience, in the most part, that's what people really are looking for. So, do bear that in mind. So there's some other things you can consider when dealing with grievances. So we do sometimes get asked to mediate in situations where maybe relationships have started to break down. So independent mediation can be helpful. It's a voluntary process in a safe space that people can talk through what they might be struggling with. It's important also to see grievances as an opportunity to look at what's maybe not working right in the team or the organization, and then thinking about how you can take those things forward and make the environment better for the people that are working for you. We, because this is our life, our bread and butter, we do offer all sorts of advice around those things. So we have on our website a podcast for dealing with investigations, as you can see there, and we do also have guides on dealing with disciplinary and grievance matters, which again, you're very welcome to access and are all totally free. And do talk to me if you want to go through, as I said, some of the, if you're facing some particular issues. So how to respond? Primarily what you want to do is respond when a grievance is raised in a compassionate way. You want to create an environment where the employee doesn't feel that they're being judged maybe, or that there's a predetermined outcome if they've raised a particular point, to listen and to provide support. It's fair to say that we are seeing quite an increase in more formal action. So employment tribunal claims are on the rise. Early conciliation claims are on the rise. So it's important not to knee-jerk when you receive grievances, but just to step back and think about how is the best way to deal with the issues, particularly if you're dealing with very sensitive issues such as sexual harassment, which can sometimes cause the need to separate employees, or if you are in, for example, the charity sector and there's been a safeguarding concern raised within the definition of safeguarding, that may lead to a need for suspension. So always think about how your route through these processes might look like, and talk to me if you need help with that. Now, the employees themselves do ultimately have the right to raise a grievance. It's enshrined in the contract of employment. Every organisation should have a disciplinary and grievance policy. And if they feel ultimately that their grievance hasn't been either dealt with correctly, or that it's not the outcome that they believe is appropriate, then they have the right to resign and claim unfair dismissal or constructive dismissal. The difference between the two being that with constructive dismissal, it becomes a case that the employee sees it as no longer tenable to stay at the organisation. So also, if the claim is of a sexual harassment or other nature in regards to the Equality Act, They could also claim something, for example, like disability discrimination, age discrimination, or any one of the protected characteristics. So the action can be fairly severe. And it's worth noting here that at tribunal, if it's shown that you're not following the ACAS code of practice, then any award given could be increased by 25%. And that's just because you didn't follow the appropriate process. Also worth noting with claims for protected characteristics, they are what we call day one claims. So they can be taken as soon as an employee joins, and the penalty for that can be unlimited fines. So some things to think about more proactively. We often find that as long as if there are different tools in place, people can maybe, these things can sometimes be better dealt with. So an employee assistance program, which is an independent outsourced provider that people can call and talk about issues they're having. That's a safe space. An unfair comparison, but if you haven't heard of them, they're like a Samaritans, if you like. You talk to them, no one knows that conversation's been had, and they are genuinely a really good source of support for employees. Take a look at your culture. So what is your culture? Where in your culture might there be situations where grievances might apply? If there is a continuance of grievances relating to workplace culture or behavior, then think about what do we need to do more proactively to resolve those. Always make sure that you've got the right policies and procedures in place, and also that your line managers are well trained to deal with grievances as and when they arise, and ultimately that you've got access to good HR advice so that people like the HR department can help you through what can sometimes be some quite tricky situations. As I said, we can help you with all of those things, from the employee assistance program to dealing with grievances ourselves. It's an area that we deal with every week, so we would be happy to help. So that's a gallop through how to deal with grievances. I guess in summary, the main point here is make sure you're taking them seriously, be aware of the risks involved in terms of particular claims that might be made. If you need to, make sure they're investigated independently, but ultimately that you involve the employee in the process so that you get to an outcome that demonstrates that you've acted reasonably under the circumstances. So I'm going to stop there. The whole idea about how to, as we've said, is quick, snappy explanations, and then a good 10 minutes for questions and answers. So I'm going to open the floor to all of you. Feel free to put questions in the comments or chat box, or come off mute and ask me questions. Very happy to answer any of those. So the floor's back over to you. Just while you're thinking about that, I think again, Kirsty, we obviously deal with grievances every week. In your experience, what have you seen as being the main determinant for success?
It really handling the process right from day one. So before you send any communication or any replies to the person with the grievance, you really need to take advice about the right way to approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is a good shout. It sometimes comes to us half done, doesn't it? Or ignored also, and it's very difficult to pick them up. So yeah. The other point, go on.
Sorry, you just have to be really careful what you say in the first instance.
Yeah.
And how you reply. Yeah.
And what we will do is, Kirsty, for example, as one of our experts, will join meetings and take minutes. And it's really important, for example, you've got minutes of the meeting so you can refer back to demonstrate you've asked the right questions and the employee's been given the opportunity to state their case fully. So always make sure that you've got your minutes. So Pam, thanks for dropping in a question there. What if the CEO doesn't want to have the right policies in place to manage these kinds of situations? Yes, love that question, Pam. Thank you. Without sounding glib, it's almost irrelevant. You can't opt out of employment law, and in this situation, you can't opt out of the ACAS code of practice either. So, if a situation was to be ultimately find its way to tribunal, the tribunal would still apply employment law and the ACAS code. And if if an organisation's been foolish enough to ignore that, then they will pay the price, and that's going to be the problem. It's a 25% uplift for failure to follow the code, and then whatever happens in terms of the claim itself, the judge has the right to award that. So avoid it at your peril would always be our recommendation, because you don't win in those situations.
I have a follow-up question, David.
Of course, yeah, go for it.
So what happens in the interim? I hear that, you know, that line down the line, there will be potentially a penalty if things aren't in place, but in the immediate situation where the manager, line manager, is dealing with a, you know, whatever situation, is that line manager also then liable in that context, in that wider context, along with the employer, you know, the organization, sorry?
Yeah, great question, Pam. If you, for example, were the line manager and it went to tribunal, you'd have to go to the tribunal. You would be summoned to explain your part in it. If you were a party to the grievance, or you were investigating the grievance, or issuing the outcome, then yes, the line manager would be liable to go to the court and be questioned. The financial liability would rest generally on the employer. At the worst, hypothetically, the manager themselves could be subject to disciplinary action if, and again, very hypothetically, it was their fault that you were all at tribunal. You know, that would be a matter that you would probably want to look at post-tribunal, which could lead hypothetically to disciplinary action. But no, the actual financial burden would fall on the employer. Does the individual decide if they want it to be dealt with formally? Yeah, they do, Joe. Great question. You would, in a grievance situation, the first thing that you would do is try to have the informal conversation. But sometimes, in reality, people don't want that, and so you should press for that to happen. But if the employee says, it's too serious and whatever else, I don't want to do that, then they have the right to raise the grievance, and you should then face into that by saying to them, if you want this dealt with formally, then please follow the grievance process. We would often look at the informal process if we were investigating grievances, and get the employee to explain why they didn't raise it informally, because that may have a bearing on the situation. Obviously, every situation being different, but yeah, they do ultimately have a right. But once you get into the formality of grievances, it's a lot of paperwork, a lot of time, as some of you, I'm sure, know. So yeah, try and deal with stuff informally if you can, is the practical advice. Thanks, Joe. Okay. It's a minefield. It is a real minefield. It sucks up so much time. So I would just urge you, I suppose, to go back and think about where might you have risks in your business, and as really well pointed out by Pam, hopefully making sure that you have the right policies and procedures in place to mitigate the risks. You'll never avoid grievances. It is a factor of working life at the moment. People are raising them, and you have to face into them, but make sure also that you've got the right advice, so that you're not stepping on potential landmines, particularly where things like the Equality Act and the upcoming sexual harassment code of conduct is going to just continually make it more important for employers to show that they are held to account for what's happening in the workplace. And as I keep saying, talk to us, because we we do deal with these things a lot. So thank you for joining our snappy how-to. The next one is a topic close to our hearts because we advise on this almost every day, which is how to dismiss an underperforming employee. Very sad and often difficult situation, but one that we'll talk to you about on the 3rd of July. We are here to help. We do, as hopefully you've seen, work on these things night and day. We offer a huge range of outsourced HR services and would be happy to support you. The other thing we do well, which you've probably picked up from this, is I love to chat. So if you do just want to have a chat, we love to meet for coffee. There's no obligation. It's free. You know, it's just a nice way to get to know local business owners and help a bit where we can. So please feel genuinely more than free to reach out. And finally, just to say that we do also have a really great little audit tool. So if you want to know whether you are following the right policies and things, head over to the website and we'll give you the link for that in the follow-up email from this. And there's a free and confidential audit that will take you about 5 minutes max to do, that can help show you where you might want to focus your your HR time. And stay connected. So we're all over everything. I haven't quite got into dancing on TikTok yet, but I'm sure that that day will come. Otherwise, we're on LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook, and obviously on the web. Yeah, keep in touch. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us, and we will send you the recording of this after. And please, as I keep saying, feel free to reach out if we can help with anything. Thank you, Moise. Thank you, Yar. I think I'm almost bang on time, which is quite unusual for me. So happy to stay if there's any questions. Otherwise, thank you everybody for coming. Really good to see you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Pam.